Patrick Pitts from the Carlton Footy Club. You're listening to the Coaches Panel.
James Walker here from the Brisbane Lions.
Jason Johannesson from the Western Bulldogs.
Luke Parker here from the Sydney Swans.
It's Rory Sloane here from the Adelaide Crows, and you're listening to the Coaches Panel.
Max Orr, Melbourne Football Club.
This is Nat Fyfe from the Fremantle Footy Club, and you're listening to the Coaches Panel.
Number 11 in the 50 most relevant. Former Brownlow medalist, Hawthorn Hawk, Tom Mitchell. He's been one of the elite fantasy footballers we've ever seen. However, he's coming off a pretty nasty injury. And will that impact Tom or not? That is one of the big discussion points on the episode. To talk about Tom Mitchell, I got Rids back. Hello, buddy.
How you going, mate?
Mate, I'm good. It's a really big one. And maybe for some people, they thought, hey, he's a lock for the top 10. And look, maybe that's okay for you. At the end of the day, you can build the list your way you want. But for me, I think there's plenty of exciting possibilities with Tom. And as we'll get to them a little bit later, there is some big question marks that need to be answered for us. Just 26 years old, this midfielder is priced considerably cheaper than what we've had to pay for him over the past few years. There's no 2019 data to be able to go through, and that is because when that broken leg took place, we did not get a chance to see him play at all in 2019. He's going to set you back just under 750k in AFL Dream Team, around about 670k in AFL Fantasy, and just over 630,000 in SuperCoach. January 10th, 2019. That's the date. Do you remember what happened that date? I do. That was the date Tom Mitchell broke his leg. And it was a disappointing thing for Hawthorn, for Tom himself, obviously, but for all fantasy coaches, because Rids, just 12 months ago, it was a fascinating discussion and dialogue that was beginning amongst the fantasy community of, can you afford to start without Tom Mitchell or not? And that injury robbed us of really seeing how coaches would go with that discussion.
Yeah, it's like, whilst it's disappointing and stuff, those things happen, obviously. But, I mean, Tom Mitchell was shaping as the must-have captain option for the rest of his life, pretty much. So, but now it poses really intriguing and interesting topics, doesn't it?
Yeah, it certainly does. And I want to get your take on some of those in a moment. But if we do look back to why everyone was salivating over him, it was because of his 2018 season and probably 2017 to be fair, but he led the league in disposals in 2018, an average of 35 a game. He was averaging 16 contested possessions and 8 clearances a game. He won the AFL MVP Players Association Award, included in the All-Australian team, and won his first Brownlow medal. But it was the fantasy footy numbers that caught us by, not surprise, but by absolute joy. During the 2018 season, he was dominant. In Dream Team and Fantasy, played every game, had just the one score below 80 and an average of 129. It consisted of 17 tons. 15 of those hundreds were over 120 and a ridiculous 10 over 140. It included a PB score for him from a match against GWS, 15 possessions, 13 tackles, and a career best 195. He can football.
Just a little bit. But this is the intriguing thing. So we've gone 18 months pretty much, like 12 months on, and then by the time he gets out on the field, it's going to be the better part of, 15, 16 months?
Yep.
So is that enough time for him to find his feet again and find that form again? So that's where the question marks are going to come, isn't it?
It certainly is, because that season, again, purely from an AFL Fantasy and Dream Team perspective, as a reference point, only Dane Swan and Tom Mitchell have had Tom Rockcliffe, should I say, have had better averaging seasons. Swanee's 2012 year was an average of 133. Rocky's 2014 was an average of 134. In SuperCoach that year, he was huge. Again, just the one score under 80. 18 tons in that year, 14 over 120, 9 over 140. And it was very, very similar to in the 2017 season. 2018 season was reflected in 2017. 20 tons in his SuperCoach season that year. Similar enough in Dream Team. Averages that were just absolutely extraordinary. It was 127 in Dream Team and Fantasy, 119 in SuperCoach. Look, really, we could go on and on about it, but ever since he joined the Hawks, he's had a massive, massive scoring. 37 tons in Dream Team and Fantasy, that's 83% of games, and 86% of games in SuperCoach, 38 tons. we could go all day on the podcast about how good he is, but let's be honest, there is some big question marks that need to be addressed.
Okay, so the first things first. Let's look at SuperCoach straight away, okay? Now, I reckon in SuperCoach he's outpriced. So I think his price at the moment is at the top of the midfielders pretty much. So you got Fife, which is about 20,000 more. Cripps is about the same price, isn't he?
They're almost comparable, yeah.
Yeah, so let's say right now, if you have any doubt, SuperCoach is the one where you rule him out. Is that fair to say?
Well, he's the 9th most expensive player in the game.
So you can actually bide your time and see how he finds his feet and everything else, and then almost use him as a first upgrade, considering he's got the round 14 bye.
Sure.
So I mean, that's probably a nice, easy way to look at it when you're looking at it from a SuperCoach perspective. So let's move forward, though, into the midfielders in the, what was it called? DreamTeam. That's the one. So DreamTeam, he's around the 21st. So if you have a look, he's pretty much the same price, around the same price as Cogs.
Yeah, he's around Cogs, Pendlebury,
Canelio.
Cripps, Yo, all around that same amount. Yeah.
Yeah, so right there, I think represents massive value, does it not? So
huge.
So we're looking at low 100s, like let's just say about 102, 103 mark on average, he's priced at. And we know he was averaging 105, 110 with bad rolls when he was at Sydney, wasn't
Correct. He? Yeah.
So I don't see any risk at all starting him besides the fact of the legs. But he won't be playing round one if his legs not right.
Of course he won't.
So if he plays round one and he plays a pre-season game, I think it's safe to assume you can almost pick him, and he does represent risk, but he represents massive, massive value, correct?
No doubt.
So, I mean, whilst he represents a little bit of risk, he represents massive value. Anyway, I'm sure you people are used to me tripping over words at times. So then we move to AFL Fantasy. So they're the limited trade formats. So that's sort of where I'm leaning at the moment, and that's where I think most people will probably go at. Well, it's going to be a decision around that mark, isn't it? And we saw Clayton Oliver a few weeks ago, wasn't it? It's probably a week ago now. So Clayton Oliver's entering his sixth season pretty much. He's only 22, 23, and he's already averaging, mid 105 to 110?
Yeah, pretty constantly.
Across the formats, if not a little bit more here and there.
Yep.
So that's where you go, well, there's massive growth of improvement there. His age, the fact that Melbourne was awful last year, and so on and so forth. There should be a little bit more support around the wings and so on. We've had Langdon, Adam Tomlinson, Harley Bennell's there. If he actually gets on the field, he's going to be a nice, handy acquisition there. So you can actually start going, well, a Clayton Oliver represents that. But on the flip side, Tom Mitchell is pretty much the same, I would have thought, at around about the same price mark. So I would have thought in Sports Dream Team, and also AFL Fantasy, around those ballpark means that you're not really, really risking much. So he really represents, it's a decision between Lockie Neal, Clayton Oliver, Nat Fife. I'm probably naming the majority of your top 50 right now.
The thing is, though,
Tom Mitchell.
Correct.
But Tom Mitchell's got a better buy, and he's actually got a dream run to start the year. So
he really does.
Brisbane, Freo, Collingwood, Geelong, Carlton, West Coast. The list goes on and on. But there's a big thing, isn't there, MJ? So Jaeger O'Meara is the big one. A fit Jaeger O'Meara in that team. Who do you send a tagger to?
Yeah, correct. You've also got a James Warple who developed nicely in there. Again, I don't think it's going to be a drastic impact to his scoring that we've seen. But again, you shut down arguably the more damaging O'Meara? We know Tom Mitchell is a damaging player. O'Meara probably a little bit more on the outside there. That's going to be the fascinating dilemma for fantasy coaches and really for opposition coaches in the AFL.
100%. So that's the big difference now. So So I'm actually leaning towards starting him. What are you going to do?
Yeah, look, I think it's SuperCoach right now. I don't think there's as much value as I'd like in the selection. So I feel like even though, often with guys coming back from big injuries, you want to wait your time. I'm really comfortable with that with him. In AFL Fantasy, he's 100,000 cheaper than Clayton Oliver as a reference point. Like, he's priced under 100 in that format. So it's, 671,000 I think he is in AFL Fantasy. If he's named round one, and the fact you get 2 trades a week and his ownership already in that format is so high, the risk of starting him and getting it wrong, whatever that even means, it's non-existent. He's in over 50% of teams there. You move on quickly if it's wrong. Dream Team again. There's value in that selection. What I really am intrigued about is the fact he is seemingly on the comeback. Sam Mitchell's the former champ of the club and now coach or assistant coach at the team has said that he's looking sharp and the plan is to play him through the preseason games and have him ready for round one. So at very least, he's on your watch list to see how it is. But something that's fascinating for me, Rids, and there's not copious, huge amounts of data, is when you look at players coming back from severe broken legs, what kind of impact is there on their scores? I've only got 4 or 5 players to really look at because, again, we're just looking for a sample size for a conversation. But, go back to 2005, Richmond superstar Nathan Brown. He was dominating that year, 101 in AFL Fantasy, 121 in SuperCoach, breaks his leg. The following year, he averages just 60 in AFL Fantasy and 65 in SuperCoach. Yep. A factor in this is role, absolutely, but it's a pretty decent regression. Similar with Barlow, on his debut year, he was going at just shy of 110 in fantasy, 116 in SuperCoach, breaks his leg. The following year, averages just 85 in fantasy, 83 in SuperCoach. It's similar regressions, maybe not as drastic, but Robbie Gray, Mitch Wallace, even Michael Voss, all from pretty severe broken legs. Nat Fyfe is another, all have some level of regression. So are you forecasting much of a regression for Tom Mitchell, or at that price point in at least a couple of formats, it doesn't really matter if he does have some?
Yeah, so, I mean, it's hard, isn't it? It's hard to predict because on the flip side, okay, you've got the Chris Newmans of the world, from Richmond, where they come back from a broken leg and they start averaging 80 the year after. And that's as bad a broken leg as you can get, the Chris Newman one. So yeah, look, I mean, with the kilometres they do in their legs, there's always going to be that impact with the soreness. So that's why, I sort of didn't mention AFL Fantasy before because I'm with you. I think it's a no-brainer start in AFL Fantasy because of the price margins. So, but, yeah, I just don't know.
It's such a difficult one, and I think that's why in the more limited trades formats of the game, you've got to be really calculated in seeing what he delivers for us in these Marsh preseason games. Hawthorn aren't going to risk him. He's too vital to their long-term success just to try to get a couple of early games into him throughout the year. And so,
but having said that, MJ, I reckon, though, that if he does play all the preseason games,
that's a good sign.
More likely to pull up sore as well.
Yes.
So there is that chance. Who was it a couple of years ago after an ACL? Was it Walker or someone like that who came back from an ACL and came back into it the year after and played all the preseason games, looked like he was going to dominate,
and then
spent the first 4 weeks off because he had a bit of lingering pain in his legs.
Yeah.
So I'm a bit of flip side. I would like to see him only play one game. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Rather than all the games.
Yeah, no, I hear that point too. And what I think, and something you mentioned earlier in the episode, is we don't need to see him for however long he plays. We don't need to see him as an inside bull dominating the midfield because, again, at his price point in Dream Team, maybe more of a concern in SuperCoach. We saw at Sydney where he was only getting a handful of centre bounce attendances per game. He was perfectly capable of turning up as an average, no problem. So, I'm okay if they look to ease him into it a little bit. My question is, Rids, is where in that format of Dream Team and SuperCoach, if you choose to go against him for whatever reason, and there's many you can choose to do that. Because again, in AFL Fantasy, I think if he's named round one, you just have to pick him. In those formats, though, is there an ownership concern in terms of percentage where the risk becomes too great to go against him?
Well, I would normally say yes, but I think in this case, because there's so many guys that go 105 to 115 in the formats in the midfield, there's just so many options. Like, it's not like a Doherty where if on his day, he's probably the best averaging defender in the league in every format.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I understand Tom Mitchell's probably 10, 12, 15% at his best like points better than anyone else. But the fact of the matter is he's not at his best to start this year.
Yeah.
I don't care what anyone says. He's not going to be at his best to start the season. That's why I sort of figure I'm actually going to look at the percentage this time and go against it.
Right.
So if he's 50% or better ownership, I might take a risk and not go in. If he's less than 50%, I might go the other way.
Yeah.
So he really is a toss of the coin because it's just hard to say unless you're there talking to him and watching him train and everything else.
Yeah.
It's just difficult, isn't it?
He's going to be one of those players that can be will really determine a lot of seasons this year, for better or for worse. And he is going to be. And the reason he doesn't make the top 10 for me is because there are question marks around him, no doubt. What regression does he have, if any? That's an interesting point. Is there still value on that starting point, or is he just going to be, and just as a bit of a critique, but only a 105, 110 guy through the midfield, which is still very good, but is it enough for us, given what we're paying for and the associated risks connected to it? One thing I do want to bring up before we wrap up the episode and talk about where he goes in drafts, which is even more intriguing for me, is when you look through the back half of the year, and again, who chooses to tag either O'Meara or Mitchell will be fascinating, but after the multi-buy rounds, for Hawthorn coming off round 14, where he does have some big premiums he shares along the sides of the Bulldogs pair of McRae and Dunkley, is also a number of GWS midfielders, so you can only start so many of them. But in round 17, they come up against the Kangaroos. Presuming Ben Jacobs is fit and Reece Shaw wants to use a tagger, he could be coming there. And then the following week, Matt DeBoer chases after him. So, look, it's probably more a unknown quantity at this stage, but certainly something to factor in if he's a post-buy upgrade target for you.
100% agree. So yeah, he's an intriguing topic. Like, I mean, we're going to chat a lot more about him through the weekly podcasts, obviously, when we start get going. But, I mean, this guy's probably the most relevant question of the year, isn't it, really? To start or not to start Tom Mitchell. So I'm sure we're going to be discussing this in spades later.
Yeah, no, we certainly will, and we will make sure we bring you all in on that conversation. Love to get your thoughts on where he goes in drafts. Wow, that could be interesting because let's be honest, Rids, you find yourself there on draft day, you've done your preparation work, and you're saying, I'm not taking Tom Mitchell in my first couple of picks. I'm not taking him in my first couple of picks because there's risks. But you get to him on draft day and you see Tom Mitchell available to you, you'll just have that half thought of, he could be better than anybody else I pick here. He could be better. So I'll see some drafts, I guarantee, where he goes in the first round. I think that's too early, but there will be coaches that just don't factor in the broken leg, don't factor in how he comes back, what role he may play as he builds some fitness and confidence through the leg. So there'll be coaches that just see him round one and pick him. Where are you thinking? Are you thinking the second round you're comfortable to get him, or would you wait a bit longer?
Look, I don't think I'd get him.
Yeah.
Because I just don't like. I'm one of those picky guys in a seasonal draft where I do not pick the guy who's missed the previous season.
Yeah.
I pretty much put a line through them. So I wouldn't pick him. Having said that, I can understand anyone picking him from around 10 to 18.
Yeah, that's second round on the wrap selection. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't want any bar of him in the first. And look, to be honest, if I had a late second pick, I'd find it hard to pass on him, for sure.
I think if I had the turn picks, like just say if there's 12 teams in your league, and I had picked 12 and he was there, I think I'd be able to go like, I'd be very comfortable going, say, Mitchell-Oliver combo around that mark.
Yeah.
You know, around, like, just as a hypothetical, like, I think I'd be able to tag them and handcuff them together so that way then at least I'd have someone else who's been playing, you know, and should be on that rise as well.
Yeah, would you be comfortable to tag, you know, again, assuming it's a second-round pick, would you be comfortable having him as an M1 if you've gone into another line? Or is it really, yes, you want to really mitigate any risk by making him your number 2 midfielder?
So I think there's much more interesting conversations around the young guys coming through, like the Tarantos and stuff.
Yeah.
So it really does depend on who's floating around at that point in time.
Sure.
So, like, you know I love Josh Kelly. You know I love Tim Taranto.
Yes.
You know this. And you know I'm a Trelaw man and a Dunkley man. So they're the sort of guys that, if they're there, I'm always picking.
Yeah.
Like, no matter what. I'll pick them over Mitchell every day of the week in this current situation. But if I could see a group of 4 or 5 of them floating around and I knew my pick was coming up and say a pick coming up in the next 10 and I was comfortable with it, I'd probably jump on him and try and land one of the other guys afterwards.
Yeah.
So I think he could. He obviously can be an M1.
Of course he could.
Obviously.
Yeah, could. No question.
Is he going to be? Well, it's going to be touch and go, but he's going to average enough. Is he going to play enough games is my question. And Al Clarkson will rest him, no doubt, will rest him through the season.
If he pulls up any
There's
soreness.
no doubt about that.
Yeah.
Well, it doesn't even matter if he does. I think when he gets to a certain point in the season, he's going to have a rest. So it's going to be very, very intriguing to see how it works. And with the rolling lockouts, how many people that start with him? And let's be honest, MJ, he only needs 130 in the pre-season, and every man and his dog are going to start with him.
Absolutely.
Oh, you watch them. They're rolling from they'll be coming in everywhere.
Yeah, no question.
So he is going to miss games through the season. There's no doubt about it. 100% guarantee that for you.
All right.
Rightio? It's whether it's going to be from soreness, another injury. Like, you know, how many times do we see these guys, you know, have a year off and go through all this pre-season, then do a hamstring or, you know, do a soft tissue in the calf? I'm not wishing anything on any of them, but we see it all the time. This guy will have a game off here and there because Clarkson's renowned for it.
He certainly is.
So, yeah, I think I've just talked myself out of starting him outside of AFL Fantasy, to be honest.
Yeah, it's one of those guys, the more time you spend looking at him, you could talk yourself in and out of Tom Mitchell and then do it again. It is going to be one of the biggest decisions you face in the limited trade formats of the game to start or not to start. AFL Fantasy, an absolute lay-down misère. Yep, just pick him. Rids, mate, appreciate your thoughts today on Tom Mitchell.
So we're going to have the top 10 after today, mate.
Yes, the top 10 is out, not far away. Patreons already have got access to who's at number 10. And this is what I'll tell you. While you probably started to go, I reckon he's here, and you're probably right. I can guarantee you this. There is one player in the top 10 you won't pick. Just at least one. You think you figured it all out. You think... No, it's not Aidan Bonner. He was the other day. No, there's one player you've not thought about. I guarantee you. But he is arguably one of the top handful of most relevant players this season. Is he tomorrow?
I'll have a guess, mate. Can I have a guess?
Oh.
Is it Dave Asprey?
We'll see you tomorrow, everyone.